Welcome, everybody. Hey, Jeff and David Bush from growmyprofit.com coming at you today on the topic of top 10 strategies to grow your sales. And wherever you're coming from today, whether you are just getting started, you're a new business, you want to grow sales, or whether you're an existing business and you've maybe hit a plateau, you want to scale, you want to grow profit, you want to grow revenue and sales, you're going to grab some great ideas, maybe some good reminders today. Jeff has had a tremendous amount of experience. We've both combined over 2,000 salespeople we've hired, fired, and trained and grown organizations through growing sales. So we're going to get a chance to share with you some strategies and tactics and tools that have helped us. But Jeff, talk a little bit about your background in growing sales as being the number one thing that's helped you to grow profit.
Well, my first sales job was at a company that they were doing like $1 million a year in sales, where just the owner was the salesperson. And he hired his brother-in-law to come build a sales organization because he had done that before, mainly in the car business, like car dealerships. Like we've got, 5 salespeople, let's hire 10 more. So, he had experience building sales teams, and I was like 20 years old, and I was one of the hires. They hired 10 salespeople, and we all started at the same day. And it was funny because this business had been around for, I don't know, 5 years, doing $1 million a year in sales, and the owner was making a decent amount of money, 100, 200 grand a year. But when my boss that hired me hired 10 salespeople, I watched that business go from $1 million to 10 million. And I'm like, wow, just hiring salespeople and giving them some decent marketing and leads to call and making hiring hungry, good sales reps that had drive and influence, took that business from $1 million to 10 million just in, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. I was fascinated by this whole hire a sales team and you explode your business and 10 times your revenue. And I'm like, that didn't seem that hard. So that was my first experience with it. And I kind of watched them do that and I learned from it. So when I started a business, and the first year it was just me doing $1 million in sales, making 150 grand a year, I thought, okay, now that I'm doing $1 million in sales, all I got to do is go hire 20 salespeople, teach them to duplicate myself, teach them all how to sell $1 million each, and I'll be a $20 million company. And it's exactly what I did. And I did it twice. I did it in the mortgage business. I went from just me selling loans to, actually, I think I had about 30 loan officers, and we got up to doing $12 million in revenue and making $3 million a year, all because of my sales team. And then when the crash of 07 happened and that business, I shut it down. It was kind of dead for the 07 years and went back into the advertising business. I started with, guess what, me doing $1 million in sales, making 150 grand, and then went out and hired 20 salespeople and built a company to 20 million in revenue and had a nice exit a couple years ago. So I just have a lot of experience, driving revenue through building a sales team. And it's not like super easy, but it's not real hard either. It's just a numbers game and fill in the holes, fill in the gap. And I was, if there's a secret to my success, it's like build a sales team, and you can really drive revenue that way.
Yeah. Well, this is just one piece of the 6-step to success model that we have to help businesses to scale their profits and to grow their revenues. And, first we start off with an assessment to really evaluate, a business's capacity to scale and where are their weaknesses, where are their strengths, where are their opportunities, where are the threats. And then we refine it through developing a financial scorecard, which, is pivotal in your ability to scale, measure performance, and make adjustments as you go. Building marketing to drive leads, drive top of mind awareness, drive retention, drive lead generation. All those things are part of the process. But when it really comes down to it, sales is the thing that drives everything. And so we're going to jump in and talk a little bit about how you can drive your sales, drive revenue, drive profits by increasing your sales team. And then we can talk a little bit more about leadership and operational aspects as we have time for today, but we want to jump right into it. So, Jeff, in terms of the 10 different strategies that we found to be the most profitable, the most proven, the most successful, evaluating your team, knowing who's on the bus, recruiting, developing a top performing team, making sure that you're bringing in the type of people that can grow and sustain a high performance. Some interviewing tactics we're going to share, hiring and onboarding, what brings people up to the pace that you need to bring them up to as fast as possible, training tactics that you can use to enhance the team, and then obviously coaching, retaining, and terminating. So let's jump right in and talk a little bit about evaluation. So the person that's watching this today, maybe they have one, two, three, five salespeople, or maybe they have 10. It's really important to understand who are the people that are on their team so that they can figure out whether or not they have the right people on the bus and who they need to go fill the bus with. So talk about how you would evaluate your current team before going out there and expanding and bringing on new team members.
Well, one of the big things we look for, because well, two out of my three businesses that I built were reaching outbound. It wasn't like an inbound, like, you've got different salespeople. Some salespeople could sit at a trade show booth and they're really personable. And if somebody warm comes up to them, it's pretty easy to sell. Those are kind of inbound leads, easy selling. But if it's outbound prospecting, that's a lot harder. It's kind of two different people in my experience. So, in some businesses, I was looking for hunters and predators, not farm animals. Farm animals need to be fed. You come out every morning and you give them grain, you give them leads, and they sell stuff. But I had to go find predators that were out hunting their own food and killing and bringing it back. So depending on the type of product you're selling, is it inbound or outbound? Two different people, in my opinion. A lot easier to hire salespeople for inbound leads, and then sometimes they get a little bit spoiled, and you got to feed them. So now you've got a marketing budget to generate those leads. So, looking at type of salespeople you have. I mean, if you have one, two, or three salespeople now, you just add up the revenue they sold last year and figure out what the average is. And you take that number and we build that into the business plan. Hey, one lady sold 200,000, another lady sold 1 million, and the guy did 500. You just take an average of the three, and that's how we build the business plan. Here's how many salespeople we need, to hit that revenue target. And we start growing the sales team, interview, hire, train, and some little tips. I never built a superstar sales team. My sales team was, I had a couple above average, like superstars. I had a couple at the bottom, and the whole bulk of the sales team was just average in the middle. And we built a successful company around that. I don't have a secret of you're going to go hire 20 A players. You can't do that. It's impossible. You have to just take a group, figure out what the average is, try to move up the group. You get a couple superstars, a couple at the bottom that you're always kind of turning and saying, hey, this, replacing, and you're kind of moving it up as you go.
What about the idea of, an organization that maybe they don't have a sales team, or maybe they've got a couple of part-time people that are helping out in that category? You talk about, increasing your margins to be able to build in profitability to grow a sales team. Would you talk about that for those people that maybe are just on the embarking into building a sales team?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are scared to build a sales team because they're afraid, I got to pay wages and that's going to be expensive, and I'm gonna have to pay commissions and that's gonna hurt my bottom line. So basically what I've done two or three times, three different businesses, is, let's say I have a product that I charge $100 for and I've got a 50% margin. So I'm making, if it's $100 sale, I make $50 gross profit. I would just raise the prices 10%. If you could sell it for $100, you could sell it for $110. And that $10 extra, 10% price increase, that's my sales commission is 10%. So it pays for my whole sales team, at least the commissions. I might have some base salaries or minimum wage, hourly wages that are gonna eat into the margin a little bit. But a sales team, if you can raise prices 10%, and good salespeople could probably sell it 10% higher, the sales team shouldn't, cost you money. It should grow revenue at a higher margin and drop more money to the bottom line, especially when you start getting big jumps in revenue and all your fixed costs, like rent and, electric bill and equipment is fixed. You start driving revenue, it just makes a big difference to your bottom line. So it kind of evens out to where you really don't lose money with inexpensive sales team. If you can raise prices 10%. That's what helped pay for it.
Yeah. So let's just take a look at your current team right now. If you were to take a look at all of the team members that are in the sales category right now, and you were just to list them in order of priority, your top salesperson to the least productive salesperson, what kind of a grade would you give them in terms of an A, B, C, D, or F? So if you rank them 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, and you were to give them a grade as an overall performance, what would be the thing that you would be able to establish as a baseline measurement of progress? And then what's the next action for each one of those individuals? It might be having a coaching conversation. It might be training. It might be, a last chance. If you don't perform, if you don't meet these production standards, you can end up seeing yourself without a job. So that's first and foremost, evaluate what it is that you got, get a baseline standard, and then establish the next action for each individual person. And you talked a little bit about recruiting, Jeff, and that, you didn't go out there and just bring in a bunch of A players, but you definitely had an ideal candidate profile or an ideal sales profile for who you were looking for. So based upon all the people that you've brought into a sales organization, is there some common denominators of success that you could say, I look for these particular factors, demographics, psychographics. These are the types of questions that I'm using in my interview process to really kind of, bring to the forefront the people that I want to spend some more time and effort with.
Yeah, I've got a first interview and a second interview with 10 questions each. So there was 20 questions I would ask. Sometimes my sales manager would do the first interview, and then if they liked them, they'd pass them to me and I'd do the second interview. And a lot of the questions were geared towards, does this salesperson have clock speed? Like if I ask a question, can they process the information quickly and come back with an answer? Because I was taught early on, you cannot teach clock speed. You either have it or you don't. So if I find a salesperson that has clock speed, everything else is teachable. Hopefully we find a work ethic, but sometimes, our best salespeople that are so good at talking to people, influencing and closing them, they tend to be a little lazy. So I can deal with a little lazy because they're so good, they're so talented. I'm always looking for talent and work ethic, and it's rare that you can find both really high. Those are your superstars, but talent, work ethic. I ran a lot of personality profiling, which really identified disc profile. Disc is the D's kind of dominance or drive, and the I is influence. I'm always looking for high DI, high DI. If they had a disc profile where they were driven and they could influence people, I'm going to give them a shot. I don't care if they're 20 years old or 70 years old. I didn't really have age or, obviously discrimination. You can't really do that age, male, female, I mean, so it was more about my personality profile. Do they have drive and influence? And do they seem to have a good reason why they want to make money? My goal was to have all my salespeople making a six-figure income. So, what'd you make last year? 60,000. Are you driven to make 100,000 and why? What are your goals? I look for a little bit of goal-oriented people that were going to push to make more money. And I had salespeople come to work for me making $50,000 a year. It was their best year ever, and I got them up making 100, 200, 300, 500 grand. That was exciting to see them progress, make more money. And of course, I'm making more money as a business owner. So that was pretty rewarding. But looking for, drive and influence, maybe a work ethic, and past success and the product they've sold before. If they had success, was it similar to my product? If we're selling a techie SaaS software product, we might have to look a little younger, someone that's familiar with technology. You can't really sell tech to someone that's still using a flip phone. I mean, you know. So, anyways, those were some of the things I looked for.
Right. So as you begin to evaluate your team, and as you now move on to the area of identifying prospective candidates that you'd like to bring onto your team, do you have a list of those individuals? Do you have them ranked in order of priority based upon how you graded them when you established their name on the list? Obviously, you either got an introduction, got a referral, they're a competitor, but have you had a chance to go through a process to get organized with knowing who are our top quality referrals or top quality candidates, and what's our next action in recruiting them and bringing them in. What's the next step and what's the due date for that? And Jeff talked a little bit about utilizing the personality assessments and profiles to be able to identify who is that DI so that you can just really focus in on bringing in those right people for those next interviews, and then utilizing the interview questions. And if you'd like a copy of those interview questions, put a message in the chat and say questions, or you can email us at support@growmyprofit. If you're watching a recording of this, you can send us an email at support@growmyprofit and say interview questions, and we'll send you a copy of those interview questions. But those are really helpful, just having really good quality questions that open up conversation so that you can really identify if this is a right fit for your organization. Talk a little bit about hiring, Jeff, because you had a lot of people coming through your doors and building new sales teams and bringing them through a process. Is that there was a required onboarding system to make that seamless, to make sure that you got the highest amount of productivity out of that new hire. Talk a little bit about that new hire process.
Yeah, I mean, just if we go in order here, the compensation plan, I mean, I've hired 1,000 salespeople paying minimum wage. I mean, minimum wage is now what, depending on what state and county you're in, somewhere between 10 and $20 an hour. Let's say it's 15 bucks an hour times 2,080 hours a year. So it's, you know, what is that, 30 grand? So I hired 1,000 salespeople on minimum wage. Their guarantee was 30 grand. It wasn't 60. It wasn't $100,000 draw. But I paid big fat commissions. So they'd get a minimum wage paycheck and then a $5,000-$10,000 commission check. So I'm a salesperson. I'm a good sales manager. I believe in incentivizing people to pay them a lot of money when they're selling, bringing in revenue. But if you're not selling anything, you're not on some big draw, you're not on a big base salary. And, I lost people that, wouldn't take the job for, 30 grand a year base, and that's fine, go work somewhere else if you can go find 60. But so big on compensation plans that are heavy on commissions. And we always raised prices so we had fat margins so we could afford to pay high commissions. We paid them a lot of money. So that was just how I done it, hiring 1,000 salespeople in 3 or 4 different industries, always very low base, very high commissions. Onboarding steps. I was always saddened to see when companies would hire someone and a salesperson would come in and sit around for a day or two. They didn't have their business cards. They didn't have their email address, their phone done. They didn't have their Salesforce logins. That used to really upset me and embarrass me because that told the new employee that you really don't give a crap about them succeeding. They're walking into a new job, sitting around for days, and it was just always a pet peeve of mine. So I was always like, I care about your success. The day you start, we're ready. You got business cards, email address, phone. You're going to hit the ground running because you're on a small base. We want to get you selling something in the first, 2 to 4 weeks if we can, depending on the product and the selling cycle. So onboarding was super important. I had some sales managers that weren't ready for salespeople when they started, and that never happened again. I would light them up, make sure that you care about these people's success and that they know that being prepared and ready for them is important. Training process. I mean, a lot of times you take a sales job and they're like, here's your training, a box of business cards and some list of people to call. And it's like, no, I want to train them on the product and what makes us unique. And because our prices are a little higher, how do you add value and justify our price a little higher? And I, would tweak our products so that they would stand out in the marketplace, adding things on to make it more valuable. So I would train on that. And we used to have anywhere from a 3 to 5 day training program. And I would get tired of doing it myself, like 3 days of, 6 hours a day or 5 days. So I would have different people train. I would bring in the operations manager. Here's the paperwork, or forms that you're going to point and click in Salesforce to get your orders through, depending on the product you're selling, so we would have operations train. I'd bring in outside vendors that we use, like in the mortgage company, a title rep, an escrow officer. And I had this training program. It was like every 2 hours, it was a different person. And I would throw it a lot at them their first 3 to 5 days. By day 5, their head was kind of spinning. They took in so much information, but they were like, wow, they really put a solid training program and gave me a lot of info. And salespeople appreciate that, and they feel like you care about their success. Collateral resources. We had a lot of one pagers, whether it's, on their computer or, pinned up on their cubicle, depending on how far you go back, of just things that they could remember, objections. So we handed out a lot of collateral material. I always had a sales manager. I think I had to be the sales manager for the first year when I hired my first 5 people. It's a tough job. It's kind of a thankless job. You don't make anywhere near as much as the top salesperson, but you have all this responsibility and long hours. So it's not for everyone. So I had to be the sales manager for the first year, growing these companies from 0 salespeople to 5. But as soon as I got 5 salespeople, I would find one of those 5 people, the top sales rep, or maybe the number 2, and promote them to a manager. And they would grow the team from 5 to 10 people, interview, hire, train, hold them accountable, the whole mentor thing. Um, Probation period. I think California is an at-will employer, so I think the first 90 days you can fire someone for any reason without any discrimination lawsuits. And I don't know, check labor law. It's changed so much. It's gotten harder. But so probation would be the first 90 days. So if you're not working hard and you're not showing up to work, or you don't make your quota in your first 30, 60, 90 days, we'd probably, let them go before they stayed past that 90-day at-will employment. So I guess that'd be our probation period.
Yeah.
So, that was kind of my system for hiring and
Yeah, well,
what we're
comprehensive,
doing.
and it's obviously moving people towards the opportunity of maximizing their potential with the right tools, the right training, the right support. And if they don't perform, then you have to move on. And you weren't afraid to move on. If you'd done the training, you'd done your side of providing mentorship, and they just were unable to perform, you weren't against the idea of moving on and starting over. And, a lot of times, business owners don't want to give up on their investment because they've invested so much into that new hire that they, carry it out for 6 to 9 or 12 months or 2 years before they let that person go. Talk a little bit about that idea of cutting bait from a person that's just underperforming or not performing at all.
Well, if I wanted to have 5 salespeople, well, let's say I was hiring my first group of salespeople, and I knew I wanted 3. I knew I had to hire 5. One of them I'm going to fire, and one's going to quit. So I always did it in groups, and we had groups starting like every quarter or every 6 months on a set time. So we're like, we need to, so we could do all the training at once. And something about hiring salespeople in groups, they kind of compete against each other, and they all want to get to the top, and they're all kind of helping each other and lobbying together. Just it worked really well. So I'd hire 5 salespeople at a time, but I knew I'm going to fire one and one's going to quit. So I'll probably end up with 3 in 90 days. So we'd have another class of 5 starting in 90 days. And we would run all the ads, do all the interviews with a target start date. You got to be in the training class that starts here. So sometimes we were hiring 5 people a quarter, hire 20, maybe we would net out 14 or 15 that would stick, and then there's always that attrition. And our product was not super easy to sell. So I'd say we had higher attrition than others. Um, sometimes I remember thinking we had 20 salespeople January 1st, and at the end of the year, we'd have 10 left, either fired or quit or moved out of the area. So I knew I had to go hire, 20 more to net out 10 and still have 20 salespeople at the end of the year. So it was a simple kind of numbers game. You kind of learned what was, going to happen, and you expect it. So you don't get depressed when somebody quits or depressed when you have to fire someone. It's all part of the game. It's all part of the numbers game. So.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the training process, because obviously you're expecting, different levels of salespeople to come in with some previous experience, some training that's already in place. But, the fundamentals of training a salesperson on identifying qualified candidates, how to approach them, the different methods and strategies on how to develop rapport, how to develop the relationship, doing the needs analysis, presenting solutions, following up, confirming interest, priority management, and technology. Obviously, these are the things that you never stop training on these things. So how did you go about offering ongoing training to a variety of different experience levels with your training staff?
So 95% of the people that I hired into my companies had never sold my product before. So I did not look for experience in my industry because usually it was bad experience. And so I kind of took the approach of training from within. So when I hired 10 loan officers to go sell loans, one of them had mortgage experience. Nine had never done it before. But that 1 week training and, you know, having them shadow another sales rep and listening and giving them all. I mean, I would train them in a week. It was amazing. And then they get on the phones and screw up for a week. But by 3, 4 weeks in, they were doing it and they were doing it my way and my system. So, and the same thing when I had the direct mail advertising company. I mean, direct mail, how many people have sold junk mail in their lifetime? How many people have that on their resume? I never went after recruiters and said, go recruit my competition away. That was just never my strategy. That can work. And I think it's not a bad strategy, but it wasn't mine. I just homegrown most of my salespeople, but that requires a lot more training and systems to get them up to speed. And it takes a little bit longer, but I felt like I trained them my way and they were kind of following our system. We had a pretty good system of, here's how many phone calls you have to make. Here's how many proposals you have to do. I knew all the numbers, from doing it for a year myself. And so, yeah, the training program was pretty crucial when you're hiring people that don't know your industry. Now, if I was selling business to business, I would look for someone who had B2B sales experience. Or if I was selling mortgages, I was hoping that I found someone business to consumer, B2C. So what I've had two B2B companies and two B2C companies. So I'd probably look for that experience somewhere, but a good salesperson that works hard and is good with customers, you can train them to do almost anything, on a product. It's not that difficult. So that was just my training was pretty heavy on industry training and terminology, the glossary, here's a glossary of 100 mortgage terms. What's an APR? What are what's a NAGAM loan? Just different terminology, just so they get up to speed with the words and just be slightly smarter than the customer.
What kind of budget would you expect to invest in ongoing training for your sales staff? Is it percentage of revenue?
Well, when I was a small company, I mean, I would just read a lot and I would bring relevant articles and training myself. So, I mean, I didn't spend hardly any money when I had 5 salespeople, but once I had 10 or 20 salespeople and we're doing 5, 10, $20 million a year in revenue, now I had a good budget for training. I would probably spend 5 grand a quarter. So $20,000 a year on training. I would either send them out to a weekend course. Maybe it'd be motivational. I mean, 20, 30 years ago, Zig Ziglar, Tony Robbins, go to the seminars, get pumped up, learn about sales. So I'd send them out to, weekend events, or more often than that, I'd bring in speakers. I'd find good speakers and have them come in and train on sales or train on the product, learning the product better and how to sell it. So I had a lot of vendors do training for free because I was giving them so much business. I'd tell them, hey, you're going to come in here and train my staff once a quarter. And so I did a lot of free training. I didn't spend a ton of money on training, but we did weekly meetings and sometimes they were motivational, sometimes they were more product training or specific sales training. But my salespeople love the fact that I would bring in outside speakers, all different personalities, different types of training. One guy's really rah, motivational. The next guy's down in the weeds about analytics. And different people get stuff out of different types of trainers. So I just always tried to make it a variety. But yeah, my budget for training was probably never more than 20 grand a year. And that was with 20 salespeople, so not much.
Well, there's obviously a difference between training and coaching. And you used a performance metric called your financial scorecard as a way of guiding and supporting an individual based on their performance. And so you used, obviously the daily tracking numbers of what the performance was that day, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. What are some of the things that you could give other business owners as tips on how to coach their salespeople to higher levels of performance? What kind of metrics and what kind of language did you use with your sales team to grow their productivity?
mean, again, when I had 5 salespeople and I was managing them, I would spend 20 minutes every Thursday on a one-on-one meeting. You know, hey, how'd your week go? How many people did you call? How many leads did you generate? How many quotes did you send? So I had all the metrics in Salesforce, and I would just run the report and sit down with them every week. Hey, it didn't look like you did too much this week. What's going on? And oh, I got personal problems, or that whole you're a counselor, you're trying to get them on track. Hey, we agreed that your goal is to make 120,000 a year, but you're not working hard enough. You're on track for making 60,000 a year. How are we going to get you to do more activity? Because sales is about activity. Good activity produces results and income. So I'd always turn it around on them and find out what's your goals, what are you trying to get to? What does your life look like when you go from 100 grand a year to 200,000? Oh, I'm going to buy a house. I'm going to help my mom out. I'm going to buy a new car. I mean, it was like, what's your motivation for making money? And I always tried to go back to that. So, 20-minute one-on-ones once a week. I mean, 5 people times 20 minutes was at 100 minutes. It's like a couple hours a week that I would invest in the salespeople. And then they could share with me problems they were having, objections they couldn't overcome just as a sales manager. But then, when I had 20 salespeople and I had 3 managers, I'm managing the managers and trying to teach them what I did, get them to do the same thing that I did to run that team and keep them motivated and hold them accountable to work and do their numbers. So
Yeah. If anybody else has some questions, you want to use the Q&A feature on the technology. If you're watching a recording, you could post a question in the comments and we'll respond back to you. But as those questions come in, Jeff, let's move on to retention. And obviously, in today's world, there's lots of different people that are coming to try to recruit your top performers and trying to bring over your team to their team. So, what are some of the things that we could share with business owners today to help them to have a better chance of retaining their top performers and their key staff members?
remember, I worked at a company that had like 10 sales reps that I had hired, and operations was screwing up the jobs and not getting them out on time and making mistakes. And man, when these salespeople sell a new customer and they're expecting a repeat customer to, they could make 20 grand, 50 grand a year off one customer. If operations screwed it up, that was very painful. So I had to go at that time. I was just a small minority owner in that company. I'd have to go to the CEO and go, hey, if you don't fix operations, our salespeople are going to be leaving. So if we get operations dialed in and it's working, and we get the salespeople what they need to do their job and sell, and we perform correctly and get the product out on time and with good quality, that was a pretty key ingredient to retention. Keep the salespeople happy, giving them the support they needed. We hired, every time we hired 5 salespeople, we hired an admin. They would do a lot of their paperwork, because salespeople aren't great at paperwork typically. They hate it. So I took all the stuff that they hated away and the stuff they weren't good at, and just hired different people that loved paperwork and loved admin, and just we always supported our people. So it was like they might be able to leave and go make a little bit more money somewhere else, but they're not going to get the support. We had a good team, a good kind of, I don't want to say family atmosphere, it's a job, but when I had 60, 70 employees, it was we did a lot of fun things outside of work, recognition parties and bowling and go to the movies. And so it kind of felt like people were close, and they didn't want to leave their friends. It's like they became friends, and it was a good work environment. And most people have pretty bad experiences inside of other companies. They used to come to my companies and be like, wow, everybody's like nice and friendly, no cutthroat, no backstabbing, and if we did have a salesperson that came in that started kind of messing things up in the culture, unfortunately, they a lot of times would be top salespeople. We'd have to get them out, because you're going to ruin what I built here. It's a good, culture, and people are helping each other. We're not, if they're lying, cheating, stealing, they had to go. And we had to fire many people for not fitting the culture. So retention to me is about just rewarding people. They say most people go to work not even necessarily for the money, sometimes for the recognition and for feeling positive about the product they're selling. One of my interview questions I just remembered was, what have you done in the past that's going to help you believe in what you're selling? And see if they come up with an answer to that, you know? Well, if I'm selling advertising to businesses, I think I'm helping their business to grow. And so I'm kind of their partner and, good answer. Um, so we looked for that, people that someone told me years ago, not too long ago, 3, 4 years ago, that sales is the biggest service position there is, kind of like a waiter, taking your order, waitress, waiter, that's a service position. And I never really thought of sales being that much service, but you're serving customers. If you serve them well, do what you say you're going to do. Um, don't overpromise, underdeliver. It's amazing how that makes a good sales rep. It's just being kind of a good person. So we tried to look for that and cultivate that. And gosh, we had very few people leave. I mean, sometimes you have a sales rep leave and be your competitor and steal all your customers. That always sucks. But you know what? That's part of business. That's going to happen. If I had 20 salespeople, maybe two of them are entrepreneurial and went out and started their own companies and became competitors, and that was fine. They did some business. I still grew. It wasn't like that's going to wipe me out if one person leaves. But that's, I think, a concern of, oh, I'm going to show people behind the curtain of what we do and the product, and they're scared to hire a salesperson because they're afraid they're going to create their competition. You're going to. That's part of it. It's a numbers game. A certain amount are going to leave. So, um, what else could I say about retention? Being a good boss and just caring about your people. And when it's salespeople, they just want to know you care about them and that you want them to grow their income and have a happy work environment, come to work and pretty positive place. So we worked pretty hard on keeping that, and did really well with retention because of it.
Yeah, so the follow-up question there is that, do you have a relationship with your staff members that cultivates trust? Are you connecting authentically with them? Are you creating a culture of community? Culture trumps strategy 100% of the time. We've all heard the quote. So do you have that culture that is attracting people to want to stay? And if you don't, what are some of the things that you can improve upon it? Jeff also talked about the idea of doing short getaways with the team, sales contests or sales incentives to create some attraction and create some more engagement. So lots of opportunities to maybe enhance the compensation plan for those people that are productive and profitable and stay around, making sure that every staff member has a growth plan so you know where they are and where they're going. One of the greatest things I've ever heard is just charting in a paradigm where you basically just draw 4 quadrants and you identify where each one of your staff members are at. Do you have somebody that's a newer employee that's an engaged learner? Do you have somebody that's a disengaged learner? They're not fully engaged, they're not doing what you've asked them to do, and they're fairly new. Or are they in a position where they're an engaged performer, which is the ideal scenario, is that you have your performers fully engaged in the process. And if you can start to identify how to move people from being an engaged learner, disengaged learner, or a disengaged performer into becoming an engaged performer, you're going to have better retention, better productivity, better profitability, and better performance. So as we wrap up here, Jeff, we've got to discuss the idea of terminating bad employees and making sure that there's a good documented process there so you protect from a legal standpoint, but also just protect the team from having more drama and trauma from having to maybe ask a top performer to leave or ask somebody that's been a long-term employee that's just not necessarily in a good headspace and is just continuing to bring the rest of the team down. So we've listed a few things here. You don't have to talk about every single one of them, but what are a couple of key takeaways for business owners that want to grow sales that have to deal with terminating an employee?
I mean, verbal warning, written warning, fired, right? There was always, a 3-step process. You verbally tell them and see if you see improvement. I'm always looking to keep them. We spent time training them and hiring them. And so, verbal warnings, having weekly meetings and making sure that the activity level is up. Some people just don't want to work, and if you don't work in sales, and go out and pump the pump, you're never going to get the water. So verbal warning, written warning, fired. I did a lot of those. You know, uh, those weekly meetings and just talking to them about, hey, are you going to do what it takes to be successful in this business? Because I'm planning on winning, and winning for me is growing this company from $1 million in sales to 40 million. And you're a part of that. And if you're not going to do the work, you can't be here. This is a winning team. We're going to win, and I was always big on that. And sometimes people fall off for 30 days and they give me a month. I'm going through a divorce or my kid's sick. I mean, you be a human being, but you know, um, keeping the activity level up and keeping the integrity up, um, being forgiving when something, goes wrong, giving people another chance. But yeah, we fired a lot of people, I would say, through the years, mainly for just a lack of activity. It was amazing. People would come to work and just sit there and not make calls, or people would call in and want a quote. And you're like, it's been 3 days. Why didn't you send the quote out? You're not very engaged in this job. And maybe they had a side hustle, or they're just coming here but the good news, it was minimum wage. So nobody was hanging out for the big salary. I hated that. I never did that. So, um, anyways, yeah. So termination's part of it, tracking activity. It's all about activity and kind of attitude. If they're ruining the culture of the company and taking the whole team down. Um, Weekly sales meetings, I had them in a group, and then I had them and we talk about wins and losses every week. Hey, you had a good week. You sold 4 deals. Tell us how you did it. And it's pretty encouraging how people would hear it. But I'm always too on the good salespeople are competitive. They want to win. They want to be at the top. So we did a lot of recognition awards, um, and and did that in a group setting, and that was big to just promote the team growing and more activity, more sales, people working harder to hit goals.
Yeah. Well, we've talked through all 10 of our sales strategies for growth and sales, revenue, and profits. And so just kind of recapping a few of them, the team evaluation, first and foremost, recruiting, having a good, solid recruiting plan, making sure that you've got good, solid interview questions. If you want to utilize personality assessments, personality profiles, obviously a great strategy for picking the right types of individuals who have the right characteristics. Onboarding, making sure you have a good hiring process so you give your new team members the best chances of success. Having an ongoing training plan so that you're growing those individuals to their max productivity and performance. And then having coaching and having some metrics and having some things that you can refer back to show how they're progressing, and maybe identifying some areas that their weakness needs to be strengthened, or they need to maybe shift in an area of strength and really focus in on some strengths that they have to increase their overall productivity and profitability. Retention, some strategies to maintain a culture and a strategy for termination. Jeff, we talked a lot about a lot of different things around sales, and this is all part of our 6-step process that we use to help businesses scale 2 to 10x in the next 3 to 5 years. As you're talking to a business owner today and they're interested in growing 2 to 10x in the next 3 to 5 years, um, tell them a little bit more about how we can help them and what we would do. What would the steps look like for us to partner with a business owner who wants to scale and grow, but maybe needs some outside perspective and experience?
Yeah, I was just thinking, my most recent CEO group that I was in was 14 different companies, 14 CEOs. And one day I looked at it, it was like there was 7 businesses that were doing $1 million to $2 million a year in sales. And then the other 7 were doing 10, 40, 50, 100 million in sales. We're like, what's the big difference? Well, the big companies, they had a sales team. The little companies didn't. It's not that hard. This is you need salespeople to drive revenue, sell your product. Unless you're on Amazon and you have some amazing product and it sells itself, totally different business. But anyways, I just found it fascinating that the 7 CEOs in my group, hey, do you see these other 7 that are killing it, that are making 2, 3 million a year and selling for $100 million, that they all have salespeople, and you're debating whether to put on a sales team? Let's go. Let's get this thing in gear. It's not that hard. Whatever you're scared of, let's get through it. So we would, whatever the companies that we help, again, $1 to $10 million companies that want to go to 10 to 100 million, developing the sales team, coming up with a plan, putting the strategy together, working the numbers backwards. What does the average sales rep do? How do we raise prices a little bit to help pay the commissions, the fee of the sales team? and then what marketing we're going to do. It all kind of wraps together, but building a sales team, gosh, I've done it like 5 times. So I think anywhere from 5 people to 40 people in a room selling, So I think we can help them looking at their product, and especially if the owner's the only one selling. I mean, you know, they've been doing it. And a lot of times the owners that are selling, they're just taking repeat orders. They're not even out prospecting for new business. So, you only grow your business, new customers, customers spending bigger orders, raising the average order, or getting them to order more often. So we work on all three of those. It's amazing what bolt on a sales team can do to a business, with a decent product. So
Yeah. For those of you that joined us live today, we'd love to get your questions answered. If you want to send us an email at support@growmyprofit.com, or you can just go onto the website and complete the free business assessment, which comes with an assessment email that gives you the details of your assessment, kind of shows your strengths and weaknesses and where you have your best opportunities to scale. And then we'll schedule a time to Zoom with you and share with you a little bit more about the strategies and tactics of how we can partner up with you. We have a good, better, and best model that we can partner up with you on. So we have something for everybody, no matter where you are in your business and where you are in your readiness to partner with us. We have an online tool. We've got our Scale University. You can partner up with all of our online content and join us in Zoom meetings and be a part of our membership-based community. We also have consulting opportunities where we can partner with you for 6 to 12 months and do it as a consultant, where we aren't necessarily vested in your business, but we're just sharing with you strategies, tools, tactics, and our professional experience and expertise. And then the final option is that if you're looking for a partner, if you're looking for somebody that can come in and really help you to scale, and you're not in a position where you can afford a big salary or salaries to hire a CMO, a CRO, a CSO, all the different C-suite employees that are going to help you to scale a business, we'd love to talk to you and partner with you on a fractional basis. We can come in and show you how to scale your business and actually be involved at a partner level, but more on a fractional basis, and help you to have a quick exit. In the next 2 to 5 years, you can end up growing 2 to 10x, and we can help you to get there faster than doing it on your own. And we also have access to some funding capacity where we can end up partnering on an equity position as well, if that's something that you have an interest in. So come on over, visit us at growmyprofit.com. If you have more questions and concerns, please reach out to us. And if you're watching the recording, please leave a comment and let us know what was your best takeaway from today. We'd love to get your feedback. So Jeff, thanks for your time today, and we look forward to seeing you all soon.
thank you.